Welcome to the Queue for Two, your podcast companion for learning all about your favorite theme park attractions. Whether listening at home or while waiting in the queue, we'll fill you in on all the information you need to get the most out of your ride experience. I'm your host, Matthew, and joining me as always is the most wily frontiersman there is, Ryan. Today, we're talking about my favorite ride in Frontierland, Splash Mountain. Ryan, how are you today?
You know, wily as always, out here panning for gold out in the old frontier.
You just got done. You just got off Big Thunder Mountain. Your kidneys are hurting, but you're feeling good. Are you ready to splash in with me and talk about my favorite ride?
Excuse me, my kidneys feel great and free of stones, I'll have you know. No, absolutely, Matthew. I am ready to get into this ride.
Heck yeah. So, all right, let's get started. First, I want to start by clearing the room. There's a huge elephant in the room and we need to clear it. This ride at Disney World was actually closed for good as of January 23rd, 2023. But Disney is currently working on the retheming of the ride to, drumroll please, Tiana's Bayou Adventure. And I will say, we will get into this retheming much later in the podcast, but I did want to go ahead and preface this episode with that information because I will be mostly covering what the ride was at Splash Mountain. And then we're going to touch on, like I said just a minute ago, touch on that new version that's going to be releasing in 2024.
So just one thing to say, I think there is a big difference between us saying that we like parts of this attraction, we like the history with the animatronics, but there's a lot of things that we don't like about it that we'll probably talk more about later as well.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll definitely get into that in a moment. But I do want to start, now that we've got that out of the way, you, our wonderful listener, might be asking to yourself, wait, what was Splash Mountain? I've never even heard of it. It's the year 2046. What is Splash Mountain? For that, I will start with the official description from the Disneyland version. Hop inside a hollow log and float through a colorful bayou as you follow happy-go-lucky Brer Rabbit to his laughing place. But be warned, Brer Bear and Brer Fox are in hot pursuit of this wayward hare. Glide past over 100 talking, singing, storytelling, audio animatronic critters who inhabit Splash Mountain and offer up their own slice of down-home culture. Sing along to classic Disney ditties including Zippity-Doo-Dah. Then, brace yourself for the big finale. This musical cruise ends in a thrilling 5-story splashdown. Clap, clap, clap.
I said this was my laughing place, and I'm laughing.
What a description. Disney killing it with their ride descriptions per usual, giving you an overview of what the ride is, but then also telling you that story that we'd love to see.
And that's definitely good that they give that information about the height of the splashdown. It's something that is readily apparent if you're looking at the ride, but it's good to know that you're going to be dropping that far in a log flume.
Exactly, Ryan. That makes sense. So, the ride itself was a very family-friendly ride with a height requirement of only 40 inches and a top speed of, you know what? I'm going to make you guess. You made me guess on the Big Thunder. We had a Big Thunder that was going, if I believe, 36 miles per hour. How fast do you think you get on the top speed for Splash Mountain?
Oh, gosh. Well, the fastest has got to be on the drop.
Correct. You win.
I'm going to say 21 miles per hour.
Would you be surprised to learn that on that drop, you go 40 miles per hour down that drop?
You're punking me. There's no
I'm
way.
not. I've never measured it, but according to my sources that I found, you're going 40 miles an hour on that drop down the hill. That's crazy.
I wonder, because I was trying to do some quick physics math and think about, like, if you were in a perfect system without any friction and were free falling at 9.8 meters per second squared, how fast would you accelerate? But, like, wow, I'm really surprised by that. I wouldn't think that we got that fast.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of discrepancy. Some people are saying 40, some people are saying 45. So I went with the 40, but that's still crazy to think that obviously a log ride, you're going 40 miles an hour just in that one brief moment compared to, you know, you're keeping that speed of that 36 miles an hour on the railroad, you know, a lot like longer and everything. But it is crazy to think about. You would think that a roller coaster would be faster, but nope. Pure gravity at work, baby.
Yeah, I definitely didn't think it was going to break 30, so that's surprising.
So for the log ride, as the ride vehicles, it is actually a log. Compared to sometimes you'll have different like canoes, you'll have different designs. It is actually a log, and it can accommodate up to 8 guests in rows of 2. So it was actually the perfect ride for larger groups that you might not necessarily get all in the same ride car. And it also made for a really good picture. If you had a larger group, you can all do, get in the same photo to then print at the end of the day. And that was one thing that I really loved about that ride. When you go with a mid-sized family, larger family, that sort of thing.
I feel like this is also historically one of the rides with some of the most epic ride photos posted on the internet.
Yep.
Like the one that immediately comes to mind is among the different rows, the front row is holding a TV, the middle row is holding a GameCube, and the back row is holding controllers like they're playing on the TV.
My question is like, how did they get all of that on there? It must have been help from Disney. There's no way they just snuck all that stuff through.
Well, for the TV, for sure. I mean, sure, maybe you could hide a GameCube and controllers in your bag, but they had some special privileges to get that flat screen on the ride.
And I'm scared of my phone when I go down log rides like that. I can't imagine trying to go down with the TV. Now, you must be asking yourself, this ride sounds awesome, right? Why did they have to retheme it? Why did they shut it down? What's going on? And that is where I will dive into the history of this ride. This ride was originally designed and opened for Disneyland in 1989 to combine 3 asks that came from Disney leadership. Number 1, they wanted to attract guests to the empty bear country that was home to the original Country Bear Jamboree. Number 2, they wanted to use the audio animatronics from the attraction America Sings, which was poorly attended and being closed. And number 3, they wanted to add a log flume ride as requested by then president of attractions, Dick Nunes. Now, a lot of people wanted the log flume ride because it's at other parks. It was sort of a park staple, but a lot of the Imagineers thought log flume wasn't special enough. There was one man for the job, who we mentioned in the last episode, the amazing Imagineer, Mr. Tony Baxter. One day, Tony Baxter was sitting in his car, stuck in traffic. And what did he do? He thought of the 1946 film Song of the South. And at that moment, he realized that's what he needed to do to create the ride that became Splash Mountain. To tie in that bear country, use those animatronics, and to make a log flume ride. So he combined all 3 of those asks and did that. And that's where we get into the history part of it with the Song of the South. Now, Ryan, I've never seen this movie. You've seen this movie, correct?
When I was younger, there was a VHS tape of this movie at my local library. And so it was one that I did see at some point in my youth.
Got it. And it's one of those that I don't know how many of our listeners have seen it. I did do a dive into the movie because, again, it ties directly into the retheming and why this ride needed to be changed the way it did. So to give a brief overview, the movie covered a southern plantation during the Reconstruction era after the abolition of slavery, and has our narrator, Uncle Remus, telling stories of the Brer animals to sharecroppers and the plantation owner's grandson, Johnny. Now, the animals section were the folklore sections, and those were the animated of Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox, the whole crew. And those sections weren't necessarily as bad. It was a lot of the live action from what I've was seeing. Again, I didn't watch the movie, but that is from what I was seeing. Now, the executives at the time said that the movie didn't technically have slaves, but it was highly controversial over its portrayal of African Americans and the egregious amounts of stereotypes reinforced throughout the film. The NAACP actually came out and stated that the production helps to perpetrate a dangerously glorified picture of slavery, making use of the beautiful Uncle Remus folklore. Song of the South unfortunately gives the impression of an idyllic master-slave relationship, which is a distortion of the facts. And at the end of the day, that's the final say of it. Like, the animatronics are cool, the animated parts are neat, but at the end of the day, the stuff behind it, the story that they used to tell those stories, that was the issue. And it was problematic then when it came out, and it's problematic today. And it's for these reasons that Disney has not released a complete version of the film on home video. You said you watched a tape of it from our discussions. It seems like they've released just the animated parts, which people have less issue with. compared to the live action sections. And it is why in 2020, Disney announced they would be retheming Splash Mountain to remove the connections with the movie.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, that's a movie that you're definitely not going to see coming out of the Disney Vault on Disney Plus for all the reasons that you listed. It is one that they are not ever planning to re-release on any streaming platform or on any physical media, and they kind of want that to just disappear. It is, I think, kind of an interesting thing you mentioned in the description for the ride that kind of the key song for this is Zippity Doo-Dah. And it was one of those songs that I felt as we were growing up was included on a ton of Disney CDs that were coming out at the time.
Right.
And I feel like there's a lot of people that know that song from hearing it played in the parks or hear that song around without any idea of where that song comes from or what the context of it was.
Right, exactly. And I think the biggest thing, the ride itself, from what I'm seeing, they only have the animated characters. And so there is a large part of the Disney community that thought that the change was not necessary, that just because it's tied to the movie doesn't really affect anything. It's just the characters, the other parts of it don't. But as we've stated in past episodes, such as, Pirates, Jungle Cruise, with these retheming efforts that Disney is doing, we here, both Ryan and I at Q for Two, we fully support making this change. It's one of those things that there's no necessary need for this ride to be based on the characters from Song of the South. Disney has proven that they can create a good story, and they have Tiana, which we'll talk about in a little bit. That's going to be an amazing addition that they can use as a story. But I did want to just go ahead and put that out there is that, we here support this retheming. And are we going to miss it? There's parts of it we are going to miss, like we talked about, the animatronics, some of the songs. But at the end of the day, it was based on a movie that has all these stereotypes. And at the end of the day, is not a good movie and, should be replaced.
Absolutely. And like you were saying, there are parts like several of the animatronics and some of the characters that I grew up riding this ride. And so there's a lot of nostalgia for me with that. But when you get into the property that it comes from, and not only just the parts within the movie itself, there's a lot of bad history around the movie too. I don't want to dive too deep into it, but one of the biggest things, the actor that plays Uncle Remus, James Baskin, when the movie premiered in the South in Atlanta, he wasn't even allowed to come to the premiere for straight up racist reasons. And as you start to peel that onion, there's just more and more pieces of really bad history there. And so this is ultimately a good change. And this change is going to be representing a really fantastic Disney movie and Disney property that doesn't have a main staple in the park yet. So it is making room for something wonderful and new that you can still have a thrilling experience riding.
Yep, 100% agree. Now that nasty history is out of the way, let's spend the rest of this time talking about more lighthearted topics. And I'm going to keep teasing Tiana because you got to wait till the end. She's there. First up with our fun facts, we're going to talk about the instances of danger. The instances where things went wrong on the ride. Everyone's favorite fun fact.
There's nothing more fun than OSHA violations.
So there's actually 3 instances that I want to talk about, and they all happen. They're all very, very similar. There were 3 instances that I found all within 2020 to 2022 where the log flumes sank during the ride. Doesn't seem like anyone was hurt, but the idea of these boats sinking kills me every time because I don't like getting wet. I ride this ride with the desire to stay as dry as possible, and to think that it's like your boat sank and you're soaked, and that's just it just makes me laugh. It's, oh man, what a ride.
Honestly, there have been times that I've ridden it that if the boat sank, I think I would just be just as wet.
That's fair.
I have gotten absolutely soaked on that attraction a good number of times.
Yep. So we've talked about the musical numbers. We've talked about Zippity Doo-Dah. There were actually 3 musical numbers that were sung in the ride by the animatronic animals. Ryan, can you list the other 2? Do you know their names?
Oh, I know there's the one that I think it's called Moving Along, where that's like the key line of the song.
So the three that I found, you start with How Do You Do, where you get introduced to the characters and they sing How Do You Do. Then you go through and you get Everybody's Got a Laughing Place. And that's when you're getting ready. You're seeing all the animatronics and you're like, what's going on with Brer Rabbit? He is never going to get caught. Of course, he gets caught. You get cast into the briar patch and then you end with everyone's favorite Zippity-Doo-Dah.
So we don't get a copyright strike. I will have no musical component to this. Also, copyright strike or not, there would be no musical component of me trying to sing anyway. But the intro song is the one I was thinking of, where it gets to the part where it's like, time to get moving along, time to get moving along. But yeah, I can't believe I forgot Laughing Place.
Everybody's got one. Now, the reason I bring up the song is because I found this to be really interesting, and we're going to dive into the movie side again. We've said this 1,000 times. We do not support the movie, and we're happy for the retheming. But I did want to bring up that Zippity-Doo-Dah actually won an Academy Award for the Best Original Song. It was the second Disney song behind what, Ryan? What do you think won the very first Academy Award from Disney for Best Original Song?
I'm going to venture a guess and say Hi-Ho from Snow White.
That's a good guess, but incorrect. It is When You Wish Upon a Star.
Yep, that'll do it.
It was one of those that I was like, yeah, didn't even think about it. I definitely think Hi-Ho. I think that's a good one. But yeah, When You Wish Upon a Star was the first, and Zippity-Doo-Dah was the second.
I was trying to remember like old Disney movies, and Pinocchio is not one of the first ones that pops into mind, but that song is iconic. Classic.
It's one of those that it's like, it's transcended the movie for sure. It's like, I think about that and honestly wouldn't even really like think about that it is from Pinocchio, because that song is so good and it's fully transcended that movie, I would say.
Absolutely. And I feel like they use it in so many different Disney shows and fireworks shows, and don't necessarily always have Pinocchio tied to it, that, like you said, it's transcended that property to be a Disney classic in and of itself.
For sure. So with the ride itself, the animatronics, they're not animals, Ryan. They're voiced by real people. Can you believe it?
What? You mean all the talking animals that Disney brought in for the ride weren't really animals? It was people?
So with that list of voice actors, there's a lot of really good voice actors that have worked on the ride, but there are three that I really want to call out. The first one played Brer Rabbit, Mr. Bluebird, some of the geese, the Boot Hill Boys, and Brer Terrapin, and is a name of Jess Harnell. Does that ring a bell?
Not a single bell.
What I know him
familiar.
from, he's got a lot of voice credits, but what I know him from most of anything is Wacko from Animaniacs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Second one played Brer Frog and Brer Bear in the Disney World version.
If you're waiting for me to fill in the blank, you will be waiting forever, because I got nothing for you.
The name James Avery, does that ring a bell?
That sounds somewhat familiar.
You might know him best as Uncle Phil from Fresh Prince.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yep.
Oh, that's cool. I did not know that.
And then the last one that I wanted to point out there are some bullfrogs throughout the ride, and the name of Thurl Ravenscroft. Now, does that name ring a bell?
That sounds really familiar.
Thurl Ravenscroft, what I know him from more than anything was he voiced the original Tony the Tiger. Not only that.
No way.
Yep. So not only did he voice the original Tony the Tiger, he also does voiceovers and singing for The Haunted Mansion, Country Bear Jamboree, Mark Twain Riverboat, Pirates of the Caribbean, Disneyland Railroad, and Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. So he's actually pretty ingrained in a lot of other different attractions, more of his like singing side. And I think that's why he played the bullfrogs in the ride, is that he, added to their like singing aspects. There's a couple other good ones, but those are the three that I like really recognized. I don't want to, rain on anyone else's accomplishments. Everyone did a fantastic job, but I definitely wanted to point out those three as people that I like recognized some of their work as well.
Oh, that's awesome. I really didn't know any history about the voice actors behind this attraction. So that's neat. I can't believe Tony the Tiger was there all this time.
Tony the Tiger and Uncle Phil all along. So I know we talked in the last episode about the budget, for Big Thunder Railroad. I want you to give me a ballpark figure of what you think Splash Mountain costs at Disneyland. I believe you said Big Thunder was in the $17 million range. The original Splash Mountain in Disneyland, $1989. What do you think that costs to open?
I think with doing all the mechanics with the water and the heavy use of the animatronics, even though there were a lot brought over from America Sings,
Right.
I'm going to guess that the price tag was a good bit higher. I'm going to guess in the ballpark of, I'm going to say 28 million.
Okay. In 1955, when Disneyland first was created, it cost them around $17 million. Splash Mountain was the most expensive project Disney had done at the time. It had a budget of $75 million.
Oh, that's
Let that
spicy
sink
meatball.
in. $75 million for Splash Mountain. For that time, that's crazy.
That is a ton, but like I believe it because it was a big scale attraction. I think it's upwards of over 60 animatronics on that ride. And I've heard that a lot of the log flume, like water-based attractions tend to be a lot more expensive up front. And then also have costs down the road and everything as well. But that's a lot, but I believe it.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say one thing about the opening that I really loved when I was looking into it. The original Disneyland ride was actually delayed from opening because there was a team of executives that wrote it originally. They got too wet. They got so wet that they decided that they needed to redesign and go back to the drawing board, redesign the boats and the angles of the sprays so that they didn't completely soak the entire boat because they didn't think people wanted to interrupt their day and get completely soaked. Now you just have a chance to get completely soaked compared to the entire ride getting completely soaked.
Well, that's the thing that's always my problem with these attractions in parks. If you're not at a water park and you're riding a water ride, like sure, if it's a really hot summer day, you might want to get some good misting, get that nice cool water.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be walking around soaked to my underwear, my socks dripping with water the whole day. That's just not what I want.
Sometimes you just gotta pull the trigger. But I understand for sure. There's definitely those days where you're just like, you got a big day ahead of you and you do not want to soak your socks. I understand that for sure.
I mean, what do they want me to do? They want me to ride that ride, get all wet, waltz right into the Country Bear Jamboree and wring out my socks on the carpet? No, sir.
The animatronics would not be happy with that. So as we talked about with the other rides, there are obviously multiple different versions of this ride. So the original was Disneyland and opened in 1989. Tokyo Disney opened in 1992. And the Disney World version actually opened the very next day in October in 1992 as well. And those were the three attractions that are, the Splash Mountain versions. The Disney World version closed, like I said, in January of 2023. The Disneyland version, depending on the timing that this episode releases, actually closes for retheming as of May 31st, 2023. So if you're listening to this, I'm sorry, you just missed it. You just missed your chance to go see it. But I will say, Tokyo Disney has no current plans to retheme their version. So if for some reason you really, really, really want to see the Song of the South base version, you're going to have to go to Tokyo. Now, with these three versions, they were all pretty much the same thing, but I do want to note that Tokyo Disney had the longest route, and Disney World actually had the most drops in the ride, with a total of 5. So Disneyland had 3, Tokyo had 4, and Disney World had 5. So it's all these like little things that, make each ride a different, just because you've ridden one doesn't mean that you've ridden them all. But at the end of the day, they're all still the same ride, if that makes sense.
Like same theming, same story, just a little bit difference of the tracks as you go, it sounds like.
Yeah, from what I was seeing. And again, only ever ridden the Disney World one, but from what I've seen. And again, if you've got experience on those rides, definitely let us know. Tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about. So now I'm going to get into everyone's favorite part, hidden Mickeys. Now, there's not really a lot to get into here because, again, the Disney World version is closing. But I do want to cover my favorite, actually, probably one of my favorite hidden Mickeys in the entire park is on this ride. And I'm very, very hopeful that they will keep it for the Tiana's redo. And it is at the very, very top of the drop hill on the left side, right before you go. There is a full Mickey sideways profile. And that by far was one of the first ones that I noticed myself. And it was one of my favorite hidden Mickeys throughout the entire park.
I am in the same boat. It's one of those that you have to line up at like the right place to see it, like in its most true form at the right time. And I agree, this is one of the ones that I saw. I wasn't super young. I was probably in my teenage years, but it's a fun one to find, and it's a neat looking hidden Mickey.
Exactly. Now, I will say there's obviously some Easter eggs. There was more hidden Mickeys to this ride. To me, I didn't really feel like it was super relevant to go through them because we are getting the Tiana retheme. And so what we're going to have to do is when we go and get that retheming into 2024, we'll have to ride it. We'll have to come back and you'll have to have a whole brand new episode and we'll go from there. So we will move to my tips for the ride. Again, don't know exactly how the new ride is going to be, but you would think that it's going to be very, very similar. So the tips that I have, what we just mentioned a little while ago. Number one, pick up your feet. There's going to be water in the bottom of the boat. If you don't want your feet wet, I always like to pick up my feet as much as possible because that's what I like the least about getting wet. My shirt gets wet. It is what it is. My pants get wet. It is what it is as long as my phone's okay. It's my feet. I don't want my socks to get wet. So that brings me to my second point. Bring a pair of socks as a spare. Keep them in a backpack that's off the ride with someone. If you got someone that's not riding, put your phone in that bag. Or if you have to have your phone on you, always carry a Ziploc bag. You can put your phone in a Ziploc bag and put it in your pocket. Won't take up that much room. Won't take up any extra room, really. And it keeps it from getting wet. And then get ready to get wet. It's not consistent, but if you're going to ride this ride, and I'm going to have to assume it's going to be the same with Tiana's theme, you're going to get wet. Anything you got to add, Ryan?
100%. My big tip for water rides is always carry Ziploc bags on you to put all your articles in, especially if you can't leave them with somebody else. My kind of go-to tip is usually when I'm in the theme park, I'm carrying a wallet with me. And so in the compartment where I would keep bill notes, I would fold up Ziploc bags and keep them in that compartment too. And it comes in handy for these type of rides. The other ride tip that I would give, and this would be, with riding this ride, there is a little secret hidden in this ride that you really can only get if you're sitting in the front row. And so in addition to the fun of going down the drop in the front row and that whole experience, there is a little Easter egg hidden that you can only hear if you're in the front row. So in one of the rooms on the ride, there's a tiny little gopher that pops down from the ceiling. And if you're in the front of the log flume, you might hear him squeak a little something at you as you go by. And if you're not paying super close attention, it might just sound like he's having a little sneeze. Like it might sound like he's going, "Achoo!" But he's not sneezing. What he's actually saying are 3 distinct letters where he says, FSU, or FSU, which stands for Florida State University,
Oh, wow.
which is one of the Imagineers' alma maters. And so they worked that in the attraction to have the little gopher rep their alma mater there.
Oh, we love to see it. We don't like Florida State in this household that much, but we love to see the representation. And again, it goes down to what we keep reiterating in all these episodes, time in and time again. The Imagineers' ability to add these Easter eggs, add these little things in there to rep not only themselves, but to rep some of the other Imagineers, to rep the surrounding world around them. And it doesn't take away from the theming. It's not a random billboard that's just there that shows someone's alma mater. It's not just some random letters that are highlighted on the wall. It's some little thing that, wouldn't even notice. If you do hear it, it is like, oh, was that what I think it is? It doesn't take away from the theming. And we love to see it.
Absolutely. Matthew, this is a very random tip. Not a tip for riding the ride necessarily, but for all of my fellow movie buffs out there. We talked about the main movie that this attraction is based on and a lot of the bad history with that. There is another movie that has ties to this ride that you can stream right now if you want to on Amazon. Matthew, do you know what other movie is associated with this attraction?
I'm not. You're our movie buff, so tell me.
So when you look at the name for this ride, Splash Mountain, it's a pretty self-explanatory name. You think you go down the hill, there's the splash of water, you get wet.
Right.
There's a splash, you're going down a mountain. Pretty straightforward.
Makes sense.
Well, when this ride came out, there was a movie starring Tom Hanks, a romantic comedy, 1984, called Splash.
Okay.
has literally nothing to do with the theming of this ride. But for whatever reason, Michael Eisner was all in on Splash being this huge success for Disney. And so when they were trying to figure out the naming for this ride, he was like, "Oh, I want you to name it after Splash with Tom Hanks." Tom Hanks isn't on the ride. There is nothing about the story of Splash that's on this ride, but it is named after the movie Splash with Tom Hanks.
Wow, I do not know how I missed that in my, I guess I just completely just glanced over that piece of history. That's insane.
Well, it's easy to miss because it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense at all. It was literally just Michael Eisner being like, "Oh, I like that movie. It's going to be great. Let's name it Splash Mountain."
That is perfect.
So if you want to check out a movie that has incredibly loose and nonsensical ties to this ride, check out the romantic comedy Splash with Tom Hanks.
I'll have to give it a try. Give it a try. All right, folks. Now that we've almost reached the end, we've talked about Splash Mountain. It's time to finally talk about what I've been teasing from the very beginning. The new Tiana's Bayou Adventure retheme. This theming, if you're unfamiliar, is based on the Disney 2009 animated film, The Princess and the Frog. And I'm going to pause there for just a second to say how underrated this movie is. This movie, Tangled and Brave, all came out in that window, and all three of these movies should be loved by the masses. And yet, people sleep on them. They're all fantastic movies. And I'll die on this hill.
We're going to agree to disagree on Brave. I don't think Brave deserves all the hate it gets, but I definitely wouldn't put Brave in the same category as Tangled and Princess.
I think you need to rewatch that movie, my friend. Anyway, we're not going to get into it.
Oh, I have. I even have that movie on Blu-ray, and I still have the stance.
Okay, well, we can at least agree that Princess and the Frog is a fantastic movie and is 100% deserving of this Bayou-themed amazing log ride that just is going to fit in perfectly into Frontierland.
I 100% agree. And I think one of the things I'm the most excited about, we talked about how music is such a big part of Splash Mountain. The soundtrack for Princess and the Frog slaps.
Yes, it does.
And so I'm really excited for the music that they incorporate into this retheming.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. The people that are against the retheming, you're just afraid of change, but it's like, look at where they have got. They've got the perfect IP to use for this retheming. From the music to the location, it's going to be awesome. So when I was doing some research into this, I found out the design is actually being led by Imagineer Charita Carter and also has our boy, Mr. Tony Baxter, listed as a creative advisor.
No way.
Yep.
I hadn't heard that. That's amazing.
And it's like, how much is he actually going to do? Who knows? But it's still a cool, little nod. It's still, again, the Imagineers respecting the Imagineers that came before. He's the original creator, and having him as the advisor on the back end, that's a cool little nod that I like.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool. I'm glad to hear that he's involved because obviously he's such a big Imagineer name that, as I kind of talked about in the Thunder Mountain episode, came from very humble beginnings in the Disney echelon, and it's neat to see him still having a touch on things and providing that consulting role.
For sure. There is a story snippet that I found that I did want to read for the people. This came from an interview with some of the Imagineers and some of the design team, and here's how it reads. The attraction is set a year after the events of The Princess and the Frog. To help her community, Tiana has created an employee-owned food cooperative called Tiana's Foods, built on a salt dome that she has purchased. On the day that guests visit, it is Carnival season, and Tiana is hosting a celebration for the people of New Orleans. She realizes that her celebration is missing one key ingredient and needs the guests' help to find it. As they join her and Louis on a trip to the bayou. In addition, the attraction will include new characters, which I thought was a really, really cool. And they're actually the designer who designed Louis and some of the key animals in, I guess, the movie is actually helping to create the new characters as well. So they're sort of making it, like canon-esque, I guess is what you could say. Like these will not be in the movie per se, but they will be new to the ride. And that's kind of where I'm thinking that they might be reusing some of the animatronics that you mentioned earlier from the original America Sings / now Splash Mountain. I'd be curious if they reuse some of those.
Interesting. Yeah, I love building out a cinematic world more within an attraction. I think that adds to the fun of the ride experience. To your point, I do think that they're probably going to reskin some of the animatronics, and I hope that they do that as well. You know, you can kind of see, I feel like there's some similarities with, if you like compare body type of, like, you know, Lewis to Brer Bear. I feel like you could reskin some of the Brer Bear animatronics with some modifications to fit Lewis's design. And man, if I can see Lewis's butt hanging out of the cave wall, that's all I want. I need that reskin.
People are going to be like, what are you talking about? Just go look it up. Brer Bear animatronic butt, and you'll find it.
With his butt and his little tail just hanging out of the wall. It could be Lewis's butt and his big tail hanging out of the wall.
Yep, exactly. So not only do we have some of the animators coming back to help out, I do want to note that a lot of the original voice actors are also returning for the ride, including, and I apologize if I butcher any of these, Annika Noni Rose, who played Tiana, Jennifer Lewis, who played Mama Odie, Bruno Campos, who played Prince Naveen, and Michael Leon Woolley, who played Lewis. So, you know, 4 of the main folks coming back for the ride. I think that's really cool because there won't be that weird voice thing where something's slightly off and you don't know why. So, you know, that just helps with continuity for sure.
100%. And it helps with the immersion too. I think, especially with Disney, obviously people have very deep connections with a lot of these properties and these characters. And so if you're keeping that voice consistent with getting on that attraction, I think that just helps with the immersion and feeling like you are actually in the universe of that character.
For sure. Now, the last thing that I want to say is that if you have not seen concept art for this ride and you don't mind like getting, I guess, quote unquote, spoiled for the ride, definitely go look it up, because not only do they have inside and outside of the ride, they also have some concept art of the nighttime versions, and they are going to light that place up. And it reminds me a lot of Pandora, how it's lit up at night in Animal Kingdom, with the way that they're going to light it up. And I think it's going to look spectacular. And I think they're really going to do a good job, and they're going to bring it up with the new retheming, but then also bring it up to like modern day standards. And it has potential to be just a visual feast. And I'm so excited.
The concept art is really stunning, and it will be exciting to see that come into reality.
Overall, I want to say Splash Mountain was decidedly my favorite ride in Frontierland, but I'm so excited to see what that new theming comes with. As soon as that ride opens, we're going to have to be there. So send us to Disney Q42 2024. Please, somebody send me there. And we'll have to come back with a whole new episode for Hidden Mickeys, Easter eggs, the whole 9 yards, because you know this ride is going to be chock full of them.
They could have a really big premiere event, just saying, where they invite all the big VIPs like Q for 2 and Tom Hanks and have us get on the ride.
Oh, man. What a trip.
Because obviously the 3 of us are the top of the list to get on that attraction early.
Oh, I love it. Well, that is all that I have. Anything else you want to add, Ryan?
The only little tiny tidbit I want to add in at the end. We're not going to dive into it. I just want to sprinkle this nightmare fuel out there for those of y'all to go on the internet and look up. I feel like you can't talk about Splash Mountain on a podcast without mentioning Tales of the Okefenokee at Six Flags Atlanta. That's all I want to say. I don't want to go into it anymore. But if you're interested in looking that up, there is a great video by Defunctland talking about the aptly named, terrifying history of that ride. And if there's enough interest, maybe we'll dive into that and talk about that in a future episode of the show. But some nightmare fuel out there. So enjoy.
All right. Well, I've never heard of it, so I'll have to go do a deep dive. That is all I've got, Ryan. I will let you get us out of here.
Well, that cue certainly went faster than expected. We hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something new about Tom Hanks. As always, we'd love to hear your experiences with this attraction or any fun facts you have. Feel free to join our Discord server and join the conversation, or shout at us on Twitter or Instagram at Q42. That's at QUEUE_FOR_TWO at Q42. You can also drop a comment on our YouTube channel. All of the links can be found in the episode description below. Now go catch that ride, and we'll see you in the next Q42.
Zippity doo dah, zippity day.